everyone, it's Vanilla. If you're new here, welcome. Hopefully the algorithm decided to show you something you'd like to watch, and also hopefully that something is me. And if you're not new here, thanks for coming to my TED Talk to listen to me yap about whatever I feel like rambling on about. Y'all are the best. I just kind of make videos on whatever I feel like talking about. There's really no train of thought. I was just kind of sitting and staring at my wall and I thought, I haven't played a Pokemon MMO in a while. Maybe I should go make a video about that. And now we're here, 30 hours of gameplay later. That's just kind of how I go through life, to be honest, drifting and going wherever my mind decides it wants to go. So let's talk about that real quick. If you're new and I didn't scare you off in the first, minute, I kind of have to start with my obligatory speech where I explain that I don't claim to know anything about whatever I may be talking about. I don't make video essays. Folks who make those kind of videos are extremely talented, but that's just not the world I live in. My brain does not work like that. I make videos that may make you chuckle or smile, so chances are if essays are what you're looking for, you might be a bit too sophisticated for my content. But feel free to take a little pit stop here if you want to try something new. And if you do find you like me, please consider liking this video and subscribing. Alright, so I chose Pokemon Blaze Online as the MMO I wanted to play, because it was the first one I stumbled across on Google. I was gonna play PokeMMO, but that's an oldie. Not like there's anything wrong with being old or anything. PokeMMO uses assets directly from Pokemon ROMs to make the game work. I've actually played a decent amount of PokeMMO, and I figured I wanted to give a different game a try. There was that, and also when I went to go check out what updates had been released for PokeMMO, an official update hadn't been pushed out since the Lunar New Year around March, so that wasn't really gonna work. I wanted to see what it was like to play in a community that was really lively, and PBO has that for sure. There are always folks typing in chat, which is a good sign. There are also updates being pushed out very frequently, and I even saw folks involved in the development show up in chat a few times, which is cool to see. The game was released sometime in 2020, I believe, so the fact that it's consistently seeing updates 4 years after its launch is a good sign, I think. So my perspective on MMOs is probably a bit different than some of you who may have played them very frequently. Vanilla's experiences being different than the majority, who would have guessed? My first MMO was Toontown, and I literally wasn't even able to read when I started playing it. So I've been playing MMOs since before I could read, and I still play it to this day. If you see rainbow vanilla sprinkles on TTR or Corporate Clash, that's me. Don't get starstruck or anything if you see me, even though I know my presence is striking. What's that? Hold on real quick, everyone. Let me sit down, Sweaty Steve. It seems like some of us are taking a bit longer to process our thoughts and feelings. Yes, Steve, Toontown is an MMO. No, Steve. Just because it's not RuneScape or World of Warcraft doesn't mean it's not an MMO. Yes, Wizard 101 is also an MMO. Those are games for babies? Oh, well, there he goes. Sorry about that. Steve has trouble understanding that just because it's a game he doesn't like or understand doesn't mean that it's not a real game. Wait until he finds out I've also played WoW and Final Fantasy. Okay, we've decided that we want to play PBO, so let's do that. When you go to download the launcher for the game from the website, it comes in a zip file, which makes download fast and convenient. Once you launch the game, you can make your account in the launcher and create your character at the same time. The art for the player characters are fun, although I'm not super fashionable, so I just ended up making myself look like a soccer mom. There are quite a few customization options, so I'm certain you can make yourself look a lot better than what I managed. And before we really start looking at the game, let me preface this part of the video by saying I'm sorry if the footage is botched or inconsistent. I wasn't really sure what I was doing, so bear with me. I'm only going to be talking about the Cinnoh region in this game, since that's as far as I got. There are 4 playable regions total: Cinnoh, Jabalo, and then there's Hoenn and Kanto. Jabalo is a new custom region, but it doesn't add a custom Pokemon or anything, just a new story and region to explore. I sunk a good amount of time taking the free-to-play route to beat the Cinnoh Pokemon League in PBO. There are a few options if you wish to donate some real-life Robux to get boosts and other items, and they're relatively reasonable for a free-to-play game if you intend to play for a bit. But I'm of the mindset that certain experiences are worth a particular price to me. If I've already spent X amount of time in the game, and I anticipate playing as much or even more than that in the future, I'll probably pull out those digits for some fake currency. But there is a free in-game system that gives you extra battle XP, and it's actually a community fund, so you don't technically have to spend any money to get an XP bonus if you don't want to. You can use a chat command to donate some in-game monies to give the server the Ho XP blessing. The blessing increases your XP by 10%. It only lasts for an hour, and the total amount required for the blessing is 100,000 in-game monies. Sometimes there would be additional XP boosts, and it would add an additional 10% for a total of 20%. And while the server was blessed, I would basically drop whatever I was doing to go and grind for XP. But honestly, that's all I really found myself doing. The gameplay loop for the first region is pretty straightforward. You play through the story of Pokemon Platinum. Well, the important parts of Platinum anyway. The story is a bit shorter than the original, with only the really important dialogue remaining. You still get all 8 gym badges and deal with Team Galactic, so it's not like it changes the game much. Unlike PokeMMO, it doesn't appear that PBO directly uses anything from the original games, and that it has been built from the ground up, which is really cool. It does have its quirks. The text appears to possibly be translated from a different language, and there are some grammatical issues, but nothing that makes it hard to understand. Sometimes the NPC portraits are inconsistent for some characters. Looker swaps from his typical appearance to generic old man occasionally, which is just a silly observation. Maybe it's meant to be a joke. This game has a lot of silly Easter eggs, like 2 trainers fighting in the battle frontier named Red and Blue. And then there was the glitch where sometimes my Pokemon would turn into a black box during battle, but I just used my imagination to pretend my Pokemon was actually there. I would say the main thing you're going to be doing in this game is leveling up your Pokemon, obviously, but it's super important in this game. And just like all of these other fan games I've played, EVs and IVs are critical to progression. And if you're not familiar, IVs stand for individual values, which are random invisible bonuses to a Pokemon's stats that are assigned upon encountering them. And EV stands for effort values. These are values that can be manipulated by defeating certain Pokemon or holding specific items. This game has a manual EV assignment system, which is very convenient. You can physically choose how many EVs you want to put into each stat. And there are items that allow you to reset unused EVs, so you can really min-max your Pokemon. So that's good, but what do you do if they have bad IVs? In PBO, if you don't get a Pokemon with good IVs, you can change that with an IV potion, which will increase the IV of a certain stat by 1. This is very different to canon Pokemon games, where IVs are static and mostly invisible values. If you're just starting PBO, which I would consider your entire time playing through Cinnoh, changing IVs is going to be pretty much out of your reach. IV potions are really only accessible through the trade house, and players get to set the prices for the items they're selling. And while I was playing, one IV potion was going for 20k, which is an insane amount for a beginner considering you get maybe 1k maximum for endgame trainers and sometimes up to 5 monies per wild Pokemon. You can also earn some extra cash by completing challenges and stuff. Okay, no problem, right? Who needs money anyway? You can just grind for a good IV Pokemon with a favorable nature. It's easy to see what stats your caught Pokemon have, since you can just hover over them in the chat window, which is an amazing feature I might add. However, certain Pokemons have certain rarities, from common to ultra rare. It's not too clear what the encounter rates are, however, you can buy lures with premium currency to attract ultra rares, and players are activating them constantly. But they're not typically active in places in Cinnoh, and if they are, they're not usually in places where a beginner would play. So if you're looking for a particular Pokemon and it's super rare, it's going to take you a while to get a favorable instance of that Pokemon unless you're insanely lucky. And I don't mean a few hours to catch a handful of the same Pokemon. With lures, depending on the rarity, you can maybe find 1 or 2 encounters of that Pokemon in an hour, which is insane because the battle sequence in this game is super fast. Like, it's so fast that a majority of the time, you're not even able to read a battle summary before the encounter ends, and it's easy to literally die while you're blinking if you're not careful. I don't do math, but folks were talking about less than a 1% of a chance to encounter some super rare Pokemon if you use a lure. So if you played this game before, you're probably like,
ugh, what a noob. You can just buy a couple of Pokemon from the trade house and sweep the Pokemon League. Don't even bother with catching ultra rares for the story.
Well, you must be Steve's cousin Melvin. I was getting to that. A few times I saw folks in chat talking to newbies about the best way to carry yourself through Cinnoh, and the general consensus was getting a Gyarados and buying a Gible off the trade house once you beat the appropriate amount of gyms. Now, getting Gyarados isn't a problem, really. You get your fishing rod in Jubilife City, and you don't need a high fishing level to catch Magikarp. But Gible is a different story. You don't get access to Gible until much later, so you have no choice but to go to the trade house if you want to get one. There are lots of options to choose from, but you have to be careful, because players can charge whatever they want, no matter how poor the stats of the Pokemon may be. So you may be paying 40k for a Gible that won't be able to carry you, and 40k is a lot of money for a beginner player when you don't have a good way to make money. Don't let the title of this video fool you. I don't want to start any sort of drama. These are just my inexperienced observations. But as a new player, I don't think relying on these Pokemon are a really viable strat. Having beat the Cinnoh Pokemon League, I think it takes a lot more than just buying a couple of Pokemon off the trade house. And oftentimes, when asked how to level up quickly, the only answer besides training during a Ho-Oh boost is to buy XP shares. Each Pokemon has to hold an XP share if they want to get the shared XP, so that's 5 total XP shares you would need. You can get a free one by completing a quest in Eterna Forest, but any additional XP shares cost around 65k on the low end on the trade house, if you're lucky. So if you spend 40k for a Gibble and 65k for one additional XP share, you're looking at over 100k already. I didn't want to use any of those Pokemon, so I spent an insane amount of time grinding to make my Pokemon as viable as possible. But as soon as I encountered the Elite Four, I realized all this grinding I did to get my Pokemon up to 80 was almost useless, and I thought to myself, man, I'm cooked. I had to level up even further than that to get to Cynthia. I'm not usually opposed to grinding in video games. In Toontown, I would Uber tunes all the time just for fun. Ubering is when you max your gags and weapons before completing the next phase of the story. It's super enjoyable to me because I get to find the most optimal way to win each encounter and earn the most amount of XP. Plus I multi-box, which is when you control multiple characters at once. But in this game, all you do is run back and forth and one-shot wild Pokemon encounters to gain XP. That's literally it. And it's almost required to one-shot them, because even if there is a 30 level difference, they can still hurt really bad. The wild Pokemon know moves like Double Edge and Hydro Pump, and they aren't afraid to use them every time you aren't able to one-tap them. I'd like to think I really took the time to curate a team of well-adjusted Pokemon. There's a cheeky NPC in the Pokemon League who whines about not EV training his Pokemon and therefore losing terribly. And trust me, that's really important to do. Like, I can totally see how if you don't EV train your Pokemon and they don't have favorable natures, trying to challenge the league can turn into being stonewalled and failing repeatedly. The wild thing is, I didn't have that problem. Whenever I caught a Pokemon, save for my starter, I made sure that their natures were correct and their IVs were relatively good. I grinded specific Pokemon to make sure I was collecting the correct EVs for each Pokemon, and it still wasn't good enough. I had to train my Pokemon to like level 80 to 84, when the highest level was Cynthia's Garchomp at level 70. Oh, and can I mention that the Elite Four members get access to Mega Pokemon, which I'm almost certain you're not going to have, so keep that in mind. But forget it, forget the stacked battles. I want to vent about the level grinding, because this is my video and I can do that. Even with one-shotting wild Pokemon, it can take forever to level up your team. Even with one-shotting wild Pokemon, it can take forever. You can earn around 1200 XP on Victory Road and 1500 XP in the Battle Frontier with the 20% global XP boost, which would be around 700 XP more or less without the boost. We're talking at level 85, a Pokemon would need around 56,000 XP to level up, so that's 46 encounters at minimum to level up with the XP boost. And if you maybe have 2 XP shares while going through Cinnoh, you still have to level up your other 3 Pokemon individually, 46 times a piece, for 1 level.
Vanilla, you can't be serious. This is an MMO, not a single player game. There's always grinding in an MMO. You can't expect not to have to spend a lot of time doing that. Plus, there's so much more, like random battles and PvP.
Melvin, you and I can't keep doing this. Like I said, I've played MMOs before, and I probably played thousands of hours over the course of my life. But I played PBO consistently and completed the entire battle pass in this game, and it's taken me over 30 hours to get to the Battle Frontier. The problem isn't the time commitment. I've definitely sunk more time into much more pointless things. But there's no real reason for me to play other than leveling up. There's mining in Hoenn, and you can fish early on in Cinnoh, but that's about it. To be honest, the only things that make this gameplay loop any different than a typical Pokemon game is that the XP gain is abysmally slow, and you can join clans to play with others and complete objectives, which is admittedly a huge part of MMOs. Obviously, there's the new region, and the story and gameplay kind of differs from then on, but the initial introduction of the player into PBO is in Cinnoh. And PBO Cinnoh is like Canon Platinum, just really tedious and missing things like contests, Amity Square, poffin making. I could go on. This could work if they replace those systems with different things to do, but there's not really much else to do. The thing I love most about MMOs are the jobs, which I know doesn't make much sense if you like playing with friends or grouping up with others. But there are some of us who don't really do that and tend to play on our own. And thankfully, MMOs typically offer amazing alternatives for folks like me. The most common jobs in an MMO would probably have to be mining or gathering, and fishing. This actually works in PBO's favor, because they would already have a framework for those 2 jobs. You have a fishing level, and if there's not one for mining, I'm sure they could add a similar system. I think it would be interesting if there could be quests for fishing, where you could earn money, items, or titles that you can equip. A job system might be able to provide newer players with a more effective way to earn money and items. This might make progression less tedious, while also adding other purposes to leveling up those skills besides encountering different Pokemon. A game that does job systems very well is Final Fantasy XIV. To make those job systems super engaging, there's a lot of variety in the level and types of nodes and resources you can collect. And you can use those resources to make items in other job classes, and eventually sell them if you'd like. Plus, you can get titles or cosmetics from completing challenges and quests associated with those jobs. You earn achievements in PBO, but you can't display them on your trainer card or anything. I didn't feel satisfaction for doing much of anything, and the only reason for me to keep playing is to be able to collect more Pokemon. But if the bar to progress to collect those Pokemon is so steep, there needs to be some cookie crumbs to kind of lead you to the end. And I guess the prospect of making more money and collecting rarer Pokemon is supposed to be the crumbs, but it just wasn't my type of cookie, I guess. And that's totally okay. There were lots of folks playing, and they were all very friendly. Veteran players were more than willing to give advice, and some would even pay for server XP boosts. So if community is a very important part of an MMO to you, PBO definitely has that. They stated on their website that they wanted to make a game that was devoid of toxicity, and I would say they've achieved that. I didn't see any arguments and everyone was friendly with one another. PBO is a very welcoming community, and if you wanted to give something new a try, I think it's definitely worth checking out. So yeah, those are just some of my thoughts, and obviously this is just my experience. I'm sure there are plenty of folks who have made videos about this game, and if it seems interesting to you, you should really consider checking it out for yourself. I don't know if I would personally go back to play it on my own. I think the gameplay loop is a bit too utilitarian for me, and I'm not really interested in community events or anything like that. But again, that's totally okay. Not everything is made for everyone. Before you move on with your amazing life, I just ask that you consider giving this video a like and maybe subscribing to my channel if you liked my content. I have lots of videos about different kinds of Pokemon games, so please consider checking those out if you've got the time. And thank you so much for watching. I hope to see you again next time. Okay, bye!